There is a lot of lore hidden in the long dark, some of which is only recoverable when the lights turn back on. Deep in the mountains of Great Bear Island is a wilderness filled with dangerous wildlife, extreme weather, and impossible terrain to traverse. At the heart lies the Timberwolf Mountain, where a strange sight draws in anyone curious enough to climb it. In this video, we will explore the lore of Timberwolf Mountain and maybe draw a conclusion on the mystery scattered across the region. First, let me start with the buffer memories of Timberwolf Mountain, which are found on a laptop in the Chasm Cave. File name Robbie09. The jump seat's all there is, so I said sign me up. Got to get home ASAP. There's a chance it's too late anyway. File name Robbie11. They're promising me a bumpy ride. Sounds about right. Nothing and no one left this far north. File name for Angie. I made it down somehow. Ankles twisted up good. This damn computer's going to make it longer than me. Looks like it. Angie, I'm sorry. File name for Angie2. One more trip up north. The way things are going, it'll be the last. Either way. But walking away right now feels good. If there's any good left in all of this. Judging by the content of these entries, this person was on the plane that crashed on the mountain above. Based on the fact that two of them were clearly written after the plane crash, this would mean the crash was unrelated to the first flare. This is actually important for later in the video. The short story here is that Robbie, the author of the buffer memories, had to get home ASAP. It seemed like it was an emergency due to him writing, "There's a chance it's too late anyway." What I find interesting is that it doesn't mention the word mainland, meaning they aren't from Great Bear Island. A while back, a commenter argued that there was another airport on Great Bear Island that could handle bigger planes. With an island as mountainous as Great Bear Island, it's a miracle a small airfield could even be built. Plus, that's not accounting for the tremendous cost of a large airport on an island that has been facing decades of decline before the collapse. Economically, it makes no sense. This person was likely at a location with a proper commercial airport that was still open, such as Anchorage, Alaska, or Whitehorse, Yukon. Let's just assume that this is the rough estimated area of Great Bear Island. Being a hotspot for seismic activity, the northwestern coast of Canada makes the most sense. By looking at the map and orienting it the correct way, the plane crash is facing roughly east or southeast, which means he was somewhere up northwest of Great Bear Island. This would mean that Robbie was likely going somewhere south or southeast, either Seattle, Washington, Vancouver, British Columbia, or another place relatively south of Great Bear Island. If you want to know why I rotated the map, you can check out this video, which is linked in the description. The first two buffer memories are from before the plane crash, and the last two are from after. The file name change is interesting as it seems he intended for someone to hopefully find the messages he left behind. Based on the context from earlier about being too late for some kind of emergency, and the final two memories being addressed to an Angie, my best guess is that the emergency is related to her. Whatever the actual reason he needed to rush back home doesn't really matter, but it is important to note the file name change. The plane he was on wasn't commercial, which makes sense as not many people go up north. Instead, he had to take a cargo plane which was full of supplies. A cargo plane full of supplies heading south during these times makes sense when you remember that money is useless in the post-collapse era. Instead, the supplier and receiver of the supply line up north are bartering for goods, which is why the plane would be full of supplies. Those were meant to pay for whatever the people up north were requesting. This is of course speculation, but it makes sense after reading through some of the other buffer memories related to bartering and supply lines. As for Robbie's fate, I believe the corpse next to the laptop explains what ended up happening to him. I think we can also piece together what happened the night of the plane crash thanks to the climber's journal note from the mountaineer's hut. From Climber's Journal page, September 5th. Arrived at the base of Timberwolf Mountain. Looks like there are some nice cracks, just like Clive said. Going to set up a top rope and do some bouldering until the others show up. Hopefully soon. September 6th. Wondering if my friends got lost as they still haven't arrived. Woke up in the night to a deafening noise and fire on the mountain. Went to check it out, but the weather got nasty and I couldn't find my way. September 7th. Clear day, I went out again. Found some metal cargo crates. They look like they might have come from a plane. There's still smoke coming from the summit. I'm heading out to see if I can make it to the peak and learn more about what's going on. From what I remember, this is one of the oldest notes in the Long Dark. Timberwolf Mountain was released several years before Wintermute had its original release, so there wasn't much to the background lore of the game just yet. When we do look at the Climber's Journal note, we can see actual dates. This is very rare in the Long Dark. The few times we see actual dates attached to a note is when the note has some important timing significance. In Wintermute Episode 1, we can see several notes like this, some of which point to 2012 being the height of the collapse. Another note also tells us roughly when the Quiet Apocalypse starts. At the collapse tunnel near Milton, you can find the prison transport manifest with a date of November XX 20XX. The X's are there to make the actual date a mystery, but the month is what matters the most. Thanks to Grey Mother and her knowledge of the collapse and this note, we can estimate that the Quiet Apocalypse started in November 2022, which would be 10 years after the collapse. So why is there a plane crashing on Timberwolf Mountain in September when the first flare hit in November? For the longest time, I believed Hinterland retconned the timing of the first flare with the prison bus note, making the Climber's Journal page non-canon. It was older than Wintermute and the story has had a revision since then, so it made sense this was a possibility. When you read the buffer memories, it all starts to make more sense. 2 of the buffer memories were written before the plane crash and 2 were written after the crash. That means the plane did indeed crash before the Quiet Apocalypse, validating the Climber's Journal page. But why did it crash? Looking at the buffer memories, Robbie mentioned that the ride would be a bit bumpy. My guess is that the plane crashed due to a mechanical error, extreme turbulence, or harsh weather. There was a blizzard the night of the crash, so that is a possibility. Seeing as the times were tough economically, it wouldn't surprise me if relaxed aviation regulations or a poorly run supply line led to a fatal crash. The actual reason will likely stay a mystery. I do have to mention how much I love seeing these lore entries line up so perfectly without inconsistencies with many years between their entries. As for the actual note, we can see an unknown climber writing about their trip to Timberwolf Mountain. They had arrived first and would await the arrival of their friends at a later time. The second day on the note tells us that the plane crash occurred on September 6th. By September 7th, they realize what had happened as they observe the smoldering summit and the plane wreckage. Something that I need to know is that there seems to be no mention of lights in the sky. This could further show how the plane crash, even before the release of Wintermute, was never intended to be related to the geomagnetic storm that created the setting of the game. As I recall from the Memories of Blackrock video I released last year, I stumbled upon a potential connection to the main topic of this video, which is Timberwolf Mountain. The note in question is called Page. Real creative, Hinterland. Anyways, this is what it says. From Page. Hard to believe we're getting more inmates this week, and in winter besides. The talk is that the warden's going to open up C Block again. And guess who's going to have to requisition all we need to stock those cells? Yours truly. Should have never come out here. Debts or no debts, this isn't living. It's just counting days. Thank God I've got Timberwolf coming up. Even with the big storm coming, I can't wait to try the summit route again. I may just be pulling at nothing here, but what are the odds this BlackRock employee was the writer of the Climber's Journal page? I think it is a possibility, and this is why I think it is. This note mentions how they were expecting new cellmates soon and that the employee was in charge of requisitioning the supplies needed to open a new cell block. I believe these are the same inmates that were in the prison bus crash in Milton the night of the first flare. This would be the same group that would include Mathis and his crew. Based on the timing, this means the inmates would be expected soon. I'm not sure if this is something you prepare for a week or a few months in advance, but that would mean the inmates were expected sometime in September. Looking at the state of Great Bear Island at this time, it's a miracle that any vehicles could even make it to Blackrock. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a laundry list of delays just to get them on the island. In fact, the very route the prison bus took is of interest here. In order to get from the coast, which is where the prison bus would be coming from with a freshly ferried group of psychos, to Blackrock, the shortest path would be through Pleasant Valley and directly to Blackrock. According to Pleasant Valley lore, an avalanche covered the road from the highway some time ago. I'm estimating the timing to just a few weeks before the first flare. The lore also mentions how the farmers had been caught by an early blizzard, preventing the hay from being brought inside. Well, the fields are still full of hay and survival, meaning the avalanche had to be recent. This avalanche, which is documented to have been caused intentionally by the forest fires, would have blocked the way for the prison bus. This is why the bus had to come from the other direction. This road going through Milton is the old road that used to connect Port Mary and a place called the Interior Mountains. Upon the highway's completion, the old road would become useless, causing Milton's economy to collapse. Since the highway is what now connects Port Mary and the Interior Mountains, there is likely a connection point with this old road. This is probably the most accurate explanation for why the prison bus is coming from this direction on the old road. There is no other reason for why they would take the longer route other than the avalanche blocking the shorter route. I know that this section is filled with connection after connection to explain everything, but it all does make some sense, right? There is a problem with all of this though. The Blackrock page note mentions it is winter. We don't know where exactly Great Bear Island is, but this would mean that the winter season has already started in September. Without knowing how far north the island is, it's hard to tell how long winter is, when it starts and ends, and how mild the summers are.
Well, I mean, I hear it's nice in the summer.
Just based on the fact that Timberwolf Mountain is getting blizzards, at least according to the Climber's Journal page, I think we can assume that winters start early and late, and summers are relatively mild. It has to get warm enough to grow hay and apples in Pleasant Valley at the very least. While the timing for all of this might be a bit off, I still believe the writer of the page note from Blackrock is the same writer of the Climber's Journal page from Timberwolf Mountain. I guess you can consider it my own headcanon with a rather complex explanation for why it makes sense. Now I want to briefly talk about the elephant in the room, or I guess the missing plane cockpit in the lake. You heard that right. You ever wonder why the plane crash in Timberwolf Mountain seems to be missing a cockpit? You can find the wings, engines, tail, and landing gear, but not the cockpit. If you recall from earlier in the video, which I hope to the Darkwalker you do, otherwise you might not be paying attention, the plane crashed in September. If you go to the summit, the front end of the tail is rotated towards Crystal Lake. The most logical explanation for where the cockpit would be is that it fell into the lake. Even though it is September and the start of a rather harsh winter, the lake might not have been completely frozen yet. You'd think that the Climber's Journal page author would have heard it and noted the noise from the lake, but there was a storm raging. It is very likely that the cockpit fell into the lake in September before it completely froze over. Now, every time you run across Crystal Lake while being chased by the nearby cougar, bear, or timberwolves, you will remember the poor souls that may be trapped at the bottom of the lake. Maybe, from their perspective, they were the lucky ones as you struggle to survive the quiet apocalypse. From now on, this is my headcanon for the missing chunk of the plane crash on Timberwolf Mountain. I believe that is the end of this video. Let me know what you think in regards to my crazy theories on the Blackrock employee's connection to the Climber's Journal note and the cockpit falling into the lake before it froze. This video was a blast to write as my brain pieced together the mystery behind this region and the plane crash. With the lore being so limited for this region, this will unfortunately be the only video about Timberwolf Mountain. Regarding the emergency that occurred on Timberwolf Mountain, it is clear that no authorities or rescue services were around to help the survivors of the plane crash. Even the Great Bear Emergency Civilian Corps couldn't do anything to help, seeing as there were no nearby radios to report about it. Speaking of the GBECC, definitely check out the video all about it, the radio network, and the various instances of emergencies and possible emergency services on Great Bear Island. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like for the algorithm so I can keep making them.